as in we built something last time when
Yeah.
BC was BC 19 somewhere, I guess. And it was a
Yeah.
lot of code,
It's something.
right? We did spend some time in building the whole code base. We tested it out, it was working and all. So we did try everything else. But now, when I was looking at it in the last week into the system app, there seems a lot of code added by Microsoft into it. And anyways, I was trying to rethink about how we should be doing SharePoint connection going forward. But
Mm.
everybody heard the news about two things, right? This is what happened in the last week. Two major news. One is that developer certification is coming in January
I
for
didn't
Business
follow.
Central developers. Okay, so yeah, it's finally coming in January next year. So January 2024. If you have developers in team, you can actually get them validated. Now, I don't know how much true it is because I read it somewhere, I guess, where Microsoft is saying that they might turn up their exam to be open book. And I don't know when that will happen. But
Open
that
means.
open book exams, like you can open any
Okay.
book, you can refer anything and then appear for the exam during the exam. But let's see when that happens. The other thing is the preview will be officially out on 4th, Monday, the 4th of September for the next release.
Yes.
And if you paid attention to the release note, Microsoft removed
They
that
have changed.
key thing. You remember that key
Indexes.
enhancement that they added, that you can actually technically add additional indexes or remove indexes, I guess. Yeah, remove indexes. So that is completely removed at this moment.
They
So
also
maybe
changed a lot
that's,
of other topics.
yeah.
They updated the content.
So yeah, by next week when the product will be out, the preview will be out. Let's play around with that and see and review what's available in the latest release then. But
Sure.
okay, so I've done a little bit pre things because we have talked about it in the past, so I didn't want to waste time into it. I've already created an app registration for SharePoint Connector, set up the redirect URL for that, which is our OAuth landing page. Um, Configured the secrets for it, and also set the API permission for it, which is here, the site read write all for SharePoint using the graph. So how you do it, as I'm pretty sure you can go back to the previous videos and see it, but it's technically here on Microsoft Graph. And because an application will be doing it behind the scenes, as in it'll all happen via code, you have to give the delegated permission. So I just went here, search for site, and then this permission will allow me to read and write content into the site and even delete and all. Okay. And that in my SharePoint, I created this new site called demo. And then in the site content, I've also added a document library for, let's say, file storage. Nothing inside here, just for that perspective. Okay, so before we get into anything, let me open my VS Code where I have the system app opened. Because this is what I was referring last week, that I would like to see how we can reduce our footprint when we are doing file management on SharePoint. So if you go into system application, which is available in the product DVD, or if you're using Dockers, you can get access to it. You will notice that there are two folders. One is SharePoint and one is SharePoint authorization. So from the name perspective, it seems that this will help us to authorize our connection, and this will let us do certain things. So let's go into it. And before I get into it, if somebody, and not today, maybe think about it and let me know how Microsoft is doing it. I'm super interested if somebody can tell me. Like, if you look at all these different folders that are available in this system application, these all have their own app.json. Okay. Like this one says security group, and then it is dependent on certain apps on-prem for sure, because these are uh, .NET references and all. And then this also have an app.json, which is a different app.json with a different ID. This one also have a different app ID. But when we install this, what we actually get on our environments is this app.json, which is the system application app.json. And I don't know why, but I'm not able to understand how Microsoft is doing it, where there are multiple apps inside one big giant system app. And each app has its own app.json. So I'm still thinking about it. If I figure it out, I'll let you know. But if you can think of any situation how this is possible, because this is a cool example of how I would like to organize my apps, for demo purposes or for even from a customer perspective. Any thoughts? Anybody thought about it? Just looking at it last weekend, I was a little bit
Well,
confused.
doesn't the system application have a parent app? Maybe there's a new concept of parent app or something. Like what app gets installed?
This app, system app. So when you get into your environment, you only see the system app installed, right? But then the system app have all these sub apps.
So what does the app JSON have for references in the system app that gets installed?
I have no clue.
Well, scroll down and see.
Nothing.
Oh, it has nothing.
Nothing.
Huh.
There's this one property which is different, internal visible to.
Oh, that's just who can. So the concept of internal visible to is a little bit different, because who kind of can utilize the methods, or like have you seen that property where you can define a function and say it's internal,
Yeah.
right? So anything that is internal cannot be used by any other application, right? And then internally this app is visible to the test apps, so the test app can utilize and those methods which are defined in this. That's what the internal visible. So this is not related to that. But I'm a little bit curious, because I see this GUID when I go into extension management and see what is the GUID of my system app, which is this. Makes sense. But then it have all these sub apps, and these have their own dependencies. Like this one, authorization has a dependency with OAuth, which technically is not a separate extension. It's an extension inside this, which is this. So within app, there are multiple apps, and they are even related to dependent to each other. And I'm pretty sure this is the ID of the app, and I'll just copy it for that perspective, and I'll see it here. This is the app. This app is being also dependent, is a parent to this app. And that all is happening within a parent app called system app. So I have no clue how Microsoft is doing it, but super cool. As in, I would be interested in learning how you can do that, because all of these, each of these folder is actually technically an app. And see how many dependencies this one have. Okay, so that's a completely different discussion for some other day. But yeah, if anybody knows or anybody learns about it in the future, just let me know. I'll be interested in understanding how this happens. Okay, so the one thing that I like about all these different folders that Microsoft have is they give you a full list of documentation about what that app can do. The SharePoint app will allow you to navigate list and folders in SharePoint, upload and download file. Even you can create folders and list items in SharePoint. So that makes it super simple that you can do majority of things that we were trying last time, with the SharePoint connector that we were building separately. There's the authorization section, which allows you to authorize your SharePoint connection. And then this allows some interface. We'll see that there's an API which helps you to initialize the client, where you need to provide the client site, subsite address, like whatever your SharePoint address, then this and this. And then there's an authorization code unit, which happens like this. We'll get into all this as we go forward, and let's try to see how much this can save time for us. So when I went inside this, what I can see is that there are two code units. One is SharePoint client, and then the implementation code unit. The implementation code unit is actually where the code is, but then it is set to access internal. And this you will see very common in this system application when you try accessing it. This have all the code. But when you're trying to refer to this app, they create a wrapper code unit on top of this implementation code unit, which is something like this. And the access of this code unit is public. So anyone, any dependent app can utilize this code unit to call method which are in the implementation code unit. So everywhere you'll see that at the end of the day, it is invoking methods inside the implementation code unit. So they keep the base code more or less safe enough so that any partner like us or anyone else will not be able to modify the behavior of it, but then they can only utilize it by this wrapper code unit on top of it. Okay. So first thing first, let's talk about initialize. That will be required whenever we do that. So to initialize a SharePoint client connection, what you need is the base URL and an authorization, which comes from a SharePoint authorization interface. I'm hoping there is another overload. And yes, the another initialize asks you for the base URL, the namespace, which is something I'll be waiting for in the next release because that is super cool. What namespace brings to the picture. And then at the end, you also will have to provide the authorization interface. So at the end, somehow we need to build something which generates an authorization for SharePoint connection, which is an interface that does something. And it is, if you look at it, in the SharePoint authorization area. I'm hoping that Microsoft will have something around building authorization. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Create authorization code. And what it returns is an interface of SharePoint authorization. Is there only one overload to it, or there are others? There is another one, and those are the only two methods in this, which allows you to create an authorization code. And we'll see which one we want. So the one needs an AAD tenant ID, which we'll get from our app. The next parameter needed is the client ID, which we'll have for our app. What is the client secret? Again, we'll have the app available. And the scope, which typically the last time when we did it, we set it to default, and that did most of the work. So it just adds the scope, and then it calls the method this one, and then this one then calls the actual implementation code unit, which creates the authorization code and returns you the interface that will help you to connect to. So from a development perspective, we just have to call this method, which these parameters, and we'll be able to get the interface out of it. Once we do that, we just need to pass the base URL of our SharePoint, and that should initialize the whole connection that we need. So we don't have to write all the funky code that we wrote last time with OAuth and other things that we wrote last time. We just have to call this method, which will do the initialization for us. So that saves a lot of time, I guess. What else is here? Get diagnostic. This is, what is this? Coordinate holding HTTP response status, reason phrase, header, and possible error information for the last API call. Okay, so this can help us in error handling somehow if there is an error during calling API calls. Then there are methods to get the list. And what else? Get list attachments. Okay. Download list attachment. It's all about list or what? Create list attachment. Create list. Is there something to upload? Because that's what the module was saying. Okay, this is all about list. So we can't upload directly. We'll have to do it on, no, here it is. Add file to folder, two overloads to it. So I just need the server relative URL, which is the URL of the folder in SharePoint. The SharePoint file, which will be written from it. So it seems that there is a table which stores all these records which are created in SharePoint. So people who have worked on CRM integration, I would relate this table to what we call the CRM tables or virtual table that are created. But this is temporary, so this will not hold the data. It'll just temporarily hold the data of the file that's being at this point created in SharePoint. So we just have to call this if we have to add a file into SharePoint, which is pretty straightforward. I can also create a folder in SharePoint using this. And what is this? Document library root folder, download file content. Now this is a little bit different because I need to get the OData ID of the file entity. We'll come to that later, maybe. We'll see. I'll give it a try later and we'll see what happens. But let's work on the initialization of it, which happens here. So what I've done already is I have taken our last code and I've just pasted it in this extension just to save time. Last time we had a setup table where we storing client ID, client secret, and the SharePoint URL. So I just copied that table here in this extension, and let's see what else we need. In this case, we need base URL. I guess that kind of gets stored in the SharePoint URL, and it needs the authorization interface. Okay, sorry, that comes here. Where is that? This one. So to create an authorization code, I need the tenant ID. So let's add that in this quickly. Okay. Hmm. Okay, what else? We need the client ID, which already we have. No problems. Client secret, we are already storing that. And then the scope, we'll set that to default when you're calling this. So with these four parameters, we'll be able to create a authorization code, which then will be utilized in my initialize connection. Okay, so let's save this. Okay. And let me add that into this page also. Okay. We already had the setup table, pretty straightforward. It stores all these details regarding the SharePoint environment. And let's try to publish this so that we can set these properties. And I'll just, while we are talking, I'll just get it from here. My tenant ID, that's what it needed, right? Okay. So, if it is asking for tenant ID, does that mean that I can actually store a SharePoint file in any of the tenants? So like if I have a head office kind of thing, which is on a different tenant in Azure, can I actually just switch my tenant ID and have that file uploaded there or read from there? I don't know. I've already put my client ID and client secrets into it, and in the SharePoint URL, the folder that I was referring to, I just pasted it in here. And we'll see, maybe this URL is incorrect, but that's okay. So now let's do and create a code unit and see, can we authorize the connection? File, let's do a new object. Code unit, SharePoint management. Yet. Okay, let's finish this and let's try to create a procedure here. Let's remove the local, and the method that we're trying to call is initialize. Let's do initialize SharePoint connection. Okay. And then that should use my, what is that table? Do I name that table? Copy that. Connector setup or SharePoint setup. Type record. SharePoint setup. And we'll get that set up. That's it. And then we need to call this code unit, which is the SharePoint client code unit. Let's create a variable for this. SharePoint client. This. Now I should be able to do the SharePoint client dot initialize. And that will need certain parameters. What are those parameters? We know the base URL and the authorization. So let's start working on the authorization first. Okay. SharePoint auth. SharePoint auth of type code unit. Auth. So what I can do is I can call the SharePoint auth first and create authorization code. Let's set up the parameters. The first one is tenant ID. So we'll say SharePoint setup dot tenant ID. The next one is client ID. So let's set this up. Client ID. The next one is secret. So SharePoint setup dot client secret. And scope. I forgot how you set up the scope, but and what is scope? Well, let's just set the default because I know default is a scope that we use most of the time. Now this will return me something which will be a interface of type SharePoint authorization. So let's define that. Authorization code of kind this. And if everything goes well, I should get the code from here. All right. Now I have the code which is needed for initializing the connection. The initialization need a base URL, which should be available in my SharePoint setup dot SharePoint URL. And the second is my authorization, which is my authorization code. Now this will return me nothing. Weird, but this should return me something. Okay. It actually returns nothing, which is, as in how we'll validate that this has successfully did that initialization or not.
You can't.
Good point, but
Certain next function will tell you.
which function? So when I call my initialize,
So it will simply initialize. So if you are unable to call the functions as you are retrieving list, that will give an error.
wait a minute, but what about this? This interface. There is this get diagnostic, and hopefully the diagnostic is an interface. Let's look at this, because if there is an error, this should return me something, right? Oh, so there is success code. Yes, sir.
This is for API call, right?
Yes.
This is HTTP diagnostic.
Right. But if there is an error, but this is not, is it calling? we haven't seen that. Let's see. This is building authorizing based on the auth that comes up, and that's it. So it is not doing anything. I guess that's what you're saying, sir, right? That this is
Not
just
exactly, but the next function will basically when it will actually do the action,
okay.
whether we are retrieving a list or we are trying to upload file.
Yeah, so let's do the get list, right?
Yeah.
And that will need a variable of this called SharePoint list. And if there's a problem, I guess, as Sandeep is saying, we'll get an error message. So let's create that variable. Somewhere here, got SharePoint list. Now the SharePoint list is already set to temporary. So I don't have to do anything. I guess I should be doing, if it is temporary, also to set to temporary, just to be clear. And then I should be utilizing this to, what does that get? Lists. Okay. And then store that output into my SharePoint list. Okay. Now at this point, hopefully I'll be able to call my diagnostic because this is actually an HTTP call.
Yes.
So let's try that because I'm actually going to use it hopefully in other areas. When I'm making API call, the diagnostic that I get from the response that I receive by making any HTTP call is kind of very hard to trace. So I like this method, which is the get diagnostic. So, and this will return me an interface. So let me define that here in my code. This is HTTP diagnostic, and which is of type interface. Now my HTTP diag will come from SharePoint client dot get HTTP. What was that? Get diagnosed. Okay. Now this interface, as we saw a while ago, and let's look at it. If you are not here, gives me different things. If it is a success code, that means is it successful or not? What is the code? So if you know the code and you want to play with different numbers, then you can utilize this. Is there an error message? And what is the response phrase out of it? Which you can also do with other ways, but it's easier this way if it is available. So let's try to see this. Like if HTTP tag dot is success code false, then I would like to see the error that comes from it. This is not it. Let's see. Okay. HTTP dialog dot get error message. That's the method. Okay. If there's an error message, we should be able to see this. Okay. So we are good with our connection, and I like how less of the code that I have to write for initialize, because last time I remember, and I'll have it code available in GitHub where we all worked into it, and that was a lot of code just to do this part. So let's call this method on that page which we have built in to see if everything is working or not. Okay. Actions. Let's create an action area. Okay, what are the areas? Let's say processing. And come on, my Copilot, tell me something. Okay, connect. This is a lot. I didn't wanted you to do all this. Okay. I don't know what it was thinking, but it also created a disconnect, which makes no sense what it is trying to do. But let's do this, and let's try to what did it say? On action is not this. I guess you need to define the trigger. And then here on action. And we'll just call this code unit method of SharePoint management. Okay. I'll be super happy if this works because this is super simple. I surely would like to spend time into it if this connection thing works easily. Okay. Dot initialize SharePoint connection. Hopefully, this either should give us a error message, else, let's see, a message from my, is there something on HTTP dialog? Dot get HTTP status. So we'll just see that what comes out of it. This is an integer. Okay, sorry. So let's do this. Okay. So you're good here with just with our connection code. So let's try to publish this and see what happens. Sandeep sir, remember last time? Just for initialization, we wasted, I guess, 2 meetings.
Access token. Yeah.
Access token,
and all that.
OAuth library, we're calling different methods. Ah, man, it was a nightmare. And I'm surprised that Microsoft don't talk about it, as an enhancement to the product. These are greater enhancement, which at least as a developer, I would like to hear.
They want to promote OneDrive.
Okay, that's a discussion for other day, but SharePoint and OneDrive technically behind the scene are the same thing, right? It's not that different. Okay, so we have all our parameters set and we are trying to see, does the connect work? Window pops up, authorizes, and now it says the scope default does not exist. So somehow I need to define my scope correctly, it seems, and let's see that. In central, define default scope SharePoint connector. Okay, Microsoft article, which looks nice. Oh, nothing here, hopefully. Scope attribute. So I don't see any scope.
This is different.
example.
This is different. So,
That's
this is
sort
for
of,
the scope on premise and all that.
Yeah,
I think,
sorry,
when
Abhinav,
we-
you're
when-
saying something?
Yeah, when we define this client ID and client secret, when we are creating a new app, so there is a scope parameter also is also there. Maybe you can try with web instead of default if web can work, because in the Azure ID there is a parameter for scope as well. So maybe there, if it is looking for the scope.
Well, I can see the scope.
So if you click on
You go
redirect
to the code.
URI,
You know,
Okay, I'm here.
what's the
guys.
code? What are you passing here?
I'm just
Is
passing
there
default.
something scope default? The default is not there in that Azure app, right?
Is there a scope here somewhere?
API permission.
API permissions. Should we see on the OAuth app? I guess let's not try to be creative. We should be creative, but I like to take things which are available, right? Somewhere here they will also be using the scope parameter. I'm hoping, because the whole OAuth happens based on the different scope that are available, right? List of scope that you want to connect. Authorize. Okay. Are they not using any of the scope? You have to pass it all the time. Acquire on behalf of token. Okay. Nothing here. Maybe in the documentation. Let's see, because it's good that they have documentation available. Scope parameter is replaced. List of text, consent to scope, list of text. 78 times. I'm not going that long. Okay. This is seriously of no use. Let's see what we did last time. Let me open my the GitHub repo and let's see what we did last time. I guess we did store it. Sandeep sir, you remember that project name or library name?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Yeah. Let me see.
BC open discussion samples.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yes. That's it. That's the name.
Okay. So let's hear. BC open discussion samples. SharePoint connector. I'm pretty sure we passed the scope somewhere. I do remember it somewhere. So people who were not there last time, you can see this is the similar kind of code we written just to do very simple thing which we are able to do very easily right now. But somewhere we did pass the scope. Let me search for that. Here. And scope seems an important parameter right now. No, not in this. Okay. Let's see, is there a documentation on this?
We said last time scope.add https graph.microsoft.com/.default.
Okay, let's try that.
That's what we added.
Let's add that. Let's try that. That should be easy enough. Okay, so
should I paste?
Have to pass. Yeah, please. Scope text. So let's just whatever comes in the chat. I'll just try that out. Okay. It seems it's trying to make the connection with those parameters, which is good. And if it succeeds, and it actually came to this point. Okay,
I put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm just going to add that from the chat into this code window. And I'm just going to copy this graph. Microsoft is the graph. People who don't know it is the whole API engine behind at least SharePoint connector and other things like Office 365 and all. And people who haven't used graph, I would highly encourage you to go to your account and then look for something called as Graph Explorer. We used it last time extensively. Now this is a GUI which helps you to see what kind of requests you have to make and what kind of responses you get. And this is majorly for all Microsoft application. So like if you are dealing in an extension, if you're working about getting the profiles. So this particular URL, and I call this, will return me my profile at this point. I haven't signed in, so this is just a sample data. But if I sign into this account, this will show me my Office 365 profile and so on and so forth. So you can do so many things from here. So anytime when you're looking to do something around API to Microsoft services, highly encourage you to go to Graph Explorer and test out things. So there are examples of doing post and get and things like that. So that's where we picked this from, the Graph Explorer thing. Okay. Let's publish this again. We made a change. And we'll be waiting for this to be published so that we can test it out. Okay. But there's nothing on that folder right now. What is a list? I'm a little bit confused, but let's see. All right. SharePoint connector. Let's try to connect. Try to pop up the screen. And now it's saying that the extension system application is trying to make an external request. And people who get bothered about it, if it is coming on your extension, go to your extension management window and you can set that flag on your app to automatically do this behind the scene. If you do always allow for the first time, it'll do that. But okay. URI validation fail. Okay. So let me see what I'm passing here. I'm actually passing, oh, I'm passing my folder structure also. So maybe I don't need that. Let's do just the root URL. This is the URL of this demo site. Hopefully this works. No. Audience URI validation failed exception. Okay, last attempt. Otherwise, we'll go and read the code. Microsoft Identity Model Token Authorization URI validation failed. The same error. Somewhere this URI seems not to be working. Okay. Not a problem. We'll try to figure out how Microsoft uses this. So they call the implementation with the base URL. The base URL is the SharePoint URL to use. So we give that. Okay. In this, it comes to the base URL and calls SharePoint URI builder to initialize the base URL. Okay. Oh, okay. And what is this method? Is initialize. Initialize. Server name is new server name. Namespace, that's okay. That's something for the future. If server name starts with HTTPS, then server name is equal to server name dot substring 9. 9. What is 9? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so that means C. What is this? Server string. Server name is of type what? Text. Start index. Okay, so it starts from here. And if it is non-secure, which majorly I'm hoping on premise, then it picks from 8. Oh, sorry. The S adds one more string into it. So it takes the server name from 9, but there is no end to it. So right now it is taking this whole URL as my SharePoint URL. Should I just give this? I don't know. Let's see.
Most likely, yes.
Yeah,
There's no
because
other explanation.
that's what the substitute is saying. So it's looking for the URL, which is this. I'm hoping. So let's do a connect. Always allow. No, it again failed. But where is this exception coming from? Okay, so this initializes where it gets the name. Okay, so a name is set. Okay, what happens after that? Then it calls the reset path. Okay. Reset path. Okay, reset path. URI is equal to blank. What? Reset path with blank. That says
There's
the
one
URI
more
blank.
overload there.
But that has a parameter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but this one does not have a parameter. So I'm hoping this is what the system is using. I'm not hoping, but this is what. So URI is set to blank. Our server name is set to our root URL that we have called. Okay. Then it calls the authorization that I'm sending as auth. So that initializes the connection. Okay, that's what it is doing, nothing else. And then we are calling what we are calling. Let's see there. Once the connection is authorized, we are calling the get list. Now the test of is this actually working or not is happening. But it goes and tries to get the list. In the get list, again it goes to the reset path, which again sets it to blank, as we saw here. Then it sets the object to list. Then it calls the authorization based on the authorization, and then the response is here. Why I'm wasting all this time? Let's debug this. We'll know where the error is sometime. I'm hoping it comes here, so I'll put it in here, and let's also see is the URL is being set correctly or not. Okay, so let's do a F5 and let's test this out this time. I think it's useful to kind of waste this time to understand. If this code can do things, I'll be happy to spend more time into it. And then I will also would like to try it out on a different tenant, because now to building the connection, it just needs that tenant info. Okay, so we get into it, we call the connect, come back here. Hopefully most of it will be non-debuggable, but we'll get into it. And it is non-debuggable at this point. Okay, so we don't know what's happening behind the scene. Nice. And that's what the power of that one line of code on top of your function, that other vendors will not be able to debug what you have written. Hopefully the get list is debuggable. So let's go in. No, it is not. The whole code unit is set to non-debuggable. That's weird. So it goes to URI code unit somehow. And then it comes back to URI builder. Implementation. Hopefully that sends out an error message. At least show me the error message. I'll have to spend my, oh, sorry, here. Okay. So it did call that, and then the error came here. It did make that HTTP connection. And let's see here what happened.
It's a scope problem.
Is it the
Audience
scope
URL.
problem?
Yes. It
Okay.
says token.audience.
Tokens.audience URI validation failed exception was thrown. Okay. I was searching for it on the web on my other screen, and I found one more example of how you write default somewhere. And I can be completely wrong, but let me just copy this from this page and paste it here. And we'll, I'm just search for it. I found it on ChatGPT, but we'll try to find out how you define the list or the default property of scope into it, if that works. And sometimes I rely on ChatGPT when I'm failing. Okay, so hopefully this time it should go bypass that, because there is a lot happening in this code unit which we are not able to decrypt. Connect, allow, 200. Okay, so it's a success. Thank you, ChatGPT. But let's have a look. So it said some random numbers ./default. Let me do a Google search for it.
This is good for something.
Configure server to server authentication from SharePoint. Is it this? Okay, let me search. No, nothing here. Connect to SharePoint online site with app only. What is the BSID into this? 1 out of 3. What is it? Where is the second one? Secret also doesn't know. Okay, I'm going to search for it before our next meeting, and I'll understand how this comes up. But you see this, that you must use multi-factor authentication with a different URL, I guess. Let me remove this part of it. Here. While connecting to PNP PowerShell, connect PNP PowerShell URL, use web login, and then due to configuration change, new location and access to this. Please help what's happening. Okay. Use web login. So this is something related to SharePoint, it seems. I'll have to search for it, how you find that out. We just utilize something which you found on web, but it's important to understand how this is coming. Okay. But in summary, we were able to get the HTTP status code as 200, but let's not look at it. I guess I would like to look at what is in the table, because this thing fills up this table. Okay, so if it's a success code, which you have seen that it's successful, the people who have utilized the last SharePoint connector, sorry guys, but you might want to rethink about what you want to use the new Microsoft way, which is, oh, sorry. First, maybe it's empty because I have nothing over there. Account. Okay. Then let's see. First, let's put a if, because I'm hoping it's empty, but still. Let's do the message. Let's try to fetch what is in the SharePoint list. The record, it's a temporary record, but we'll get some details out of it once we test this out. Okay, I don't know. Anubhav, you were there when you were building the last SharePoint thing?
No, I was not there in the last meeting.
Not in the last meeting. Remember last time when we were coding, we built this whole SharePoint library thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that seems pretty easy now. So when I do a connect, there are 17 records. Nice. And the first one says the home organization and some list name and web list. Can I pop up that table? Is there a way that I can run the object? Run record ID page. Okay, let's try this. I guess you can do the 0 and then you can pass the SharePoint list into it. That's it. All right, let's see what comes of it. I know there are 17 records, so I'm just commenting this message out. Just want to see what comes in and what is it is reading from this area. Okay, here we are. Good. Connect. Oh, I can't do. Okay. Okay, but in general, some to put it very simply, what we were trying to do, we kind of achieve that by saying that if you want to make a connection to SharePoint, and this will be our method that we'll be utilizing going forward for adding a file into SharePoint or reading a file from SharePoint and so on and so forth, whatever the methods that are available in the actual SharePoint code unit. But this makes it super simple that you just have to define certain parameter. I still have to figure out how this scope is set. I'll get that done before we meet next time. And initializing a setup is super simple, as we just saw. And if you have to do debugging scenarios and all, you can utilize the get diagnostic method, which returns you an interface which gives you more or less every information of the last API call that has been succeeded or failed in the whole equation. So there's a lot into it, just in this code unit. I'm not going outside this code unit. Initialize we have used today, so that we kind of completed this. We also use the get diagnostic to get the list. Now we also use the get list. It's a collection of temporary record. Operation successful, otherwise it's written false. Okay. You can also get the list item if you know which list you are referring to. And then in forward, as we saw at the end of this, somewhere we have methods to add file to a folder. So you can eventually add a file to a specific folder in SharePoint. And there are other methods which are allowing you to download the file or creating the folder. So there are some solutions which allow you to create folders in SharePoint by complex code. I'm hoping if they haven't upgraded to this, but this will make it simpler where you can just do it as a PTE if needed. So people who have utilized that code last time, I would highly encourage, and maybe I'll remove this repo altogether because this is a lot of code and you don't need all this code now. So we'll try to cover the same scenario where what we are trying to do is adding a allowing user to select a file, uploading that file to SharePoint, getting the URL of SharePoint URL of that file, and then adding it into the record link of Business Central attached to that record. So that way we are trying to save the space inside the Business Central database and having all these files into SharePoint. So this method will be utilized again, but now in a pretty simple way, I'm hoping at that point. Oh, anything else, anyone, before we end today's call?
No, thanks. It was great.
Yeah, I'm going to re-implement wherever I have done that. The old one, for sure.
Yeah, it will become easier.
It'll become easier, and then at the end of the day, I feel it weird because in the old NAV word, we wanted to have our heavy footprint with the code in the nav environment, but with the Business Central, all of us, we want our as less as our footprint exists in the code, that safe we are for the future, which is a weird feeling. But I guess now I'm very conscious about how much footprint we are leaving when we are writing these PTEs on for our customers. But that's it for today, I guess. And then I'll see you next week. And okay, yeah, one question. Do we continue with this next week or should we take a pause because next week we'll have the next preview version available? I'm okay either ways.
We'll see what all we can test in the preview. Maybe if we can devote some time, then you can take a call. Which one will be better?
Yeah, because development wise, we'll not be able to cover anything on the previews, right? We can only review the functionalities that are available. Until unless you have access to insider build, and then you can build some extension which are supported to that. But while I was building this extension today, I noticed one more thing. Where is that? Let me open my VS Code. I also noticed that when you do AL Go today, you see the 12.0 already there, which is, I didn't expected that to be available right now, but that's available. So I don't know, can I code against 12.0 as of this moment? I have no clue, but it seems I should be able to. So we'll give it a try next week once the previews are out. So if you have any feature in the list that you would like to focus us next week in the new release, just ping me somewhere in any social media account or send me an email and we'll surely cover that next week. Otherwise, we'll continue here if that doesn't make sense. Okay, then. See you next
Sure.
week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Saurav. Bye.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Saurav.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you. Goodbye.
Thanks, Vazan.
Sir, just one more question.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever done use this data transfer
Oh, yeah.
in Business Central?
Yeah.
Is there a code somewhere in? Will I be able to find it?
I'll send it to you. I'll have it in one of my project. I'll just send it to you. It's just that you can apply a filter on a table and then you can move it to the new schema, new table if the field underline fields are same. So I'll send you a sample. Or
Can
if
we
you,
write? Can we apply multiple filters, right?
yeah, and
Or
if
it's
you don't,
only one filter?
no, you can apply multiple filters. And if you don't want to wait, what I would suggest, which is okay, because I might be busy tomorrow.
Look, I checked
is
the code today. I did an upgrade where the data was
Okay.
huge and Microsoft was using it. So just
Yeah,
I knew that something was there, but I've never
right.
used it.
Oh, it's a pretty one, because you will only use it if you are changing your table design, more or less, right? So when you're changing your table design, like where Microsoft does it, the pricing one, right? I'm pretty sure in the
I'm thinking of
pricing.
using it somewhere else. My idea was to, once in a year, archive the change log entry table. Instead of deleting it, my few customer requires it to be transferred, and then there are crores of records and it takes time. Now this thing does that work. I was having some 5 CR entries of GL entry, and it modified all of them. It was updating VAT reporting date. It was able to update in around 1.5 hours.
Right. So what about this feature, which is called data compression? Do you use this?
Data
Archive?
compression I don't want to
Data
use
archive.
because I would be. No, I'm
Yes,
not.
there is a data archive, and you can actually create an archive. Okay. And then inside that archive, come on. Oh, there was something around it. New save as Excel. I knew there was something. Test and start logging. But what it is logging? I don't know what it is logging. I think I have seen something. Let me see if I find it. Number of record, number of table, and maybe I'm not utilizing it this right way. But let's say there's a whole material about it. What is this? Read permission. Yes, number of record. Okay. Action save as Excel. Oh, come on. What is this? I know this used to do something. I forgot how you to utilize it. There is an actual extension about it, and maybe it's part of the system app. Let's have a look on it.
Yeah, there's a data archive extension that I've seen. I was not aware what's the purpose. I checked it.
I have read about it, but I haven't utilized it as much. So there's this archiving code unit, and that kind of gets called create, open, save, discard, change, save, record. Not this one for sure. But yeah, that is good if you have to copy a large set of data, right? And you can apply multiple filters. I'm very sure about it because I have utilized it in some areas of my upgrade code.
I just happened to see it last week. I was aware that they have done something with SQL to speed up the data transfer during upgrades, but I never got hold of it.
Yeah, it is there, and it's been there for a while at this moment. And let me see, because the first use case I saw it is in the pricing change. What is that? Upgrade base app, data upgrade management, API data upgrade, tag definition.
Data upgrade management will have it. The price also, I believe.
Yeah. Let's see. Price, sales price. No, it's just the management of it. It's nothing. Okay, let me see. Permission set provides.
Can you see this app? Upgrade dash base app.
No, that have nothing. I just checked it.
Base app. Okay.
Base have not have that thing. I guess this one should have it. Okay, data transfer is the thing. Right? Data transfer. Here.
Yeah.
What they are doing here, if you look at it, is they are setting up the table. Okay, so this data transfer is for item ledger entry, and then they are adding the filters on the source where the
Only one
field
field.
is not equal, and you can add more fields if needed. Okay.
That is something I was looking for, but in that case, it will help.
Yeah, because when you look at, let me see if I can find this otherwhere, because I'm pretty sure I've used it in different areas with multiple filters. Field value.
Here it
Move
is.
obsolete
Add
field.
field
Here,
value.
yeah.